Wow, Dr. Eaves, you have so much range from mathematics to religion to
Yeah.
politics. You're like a mastermind. I'm like, wow, where do I start with this?
You know, the October 7th attack was unprovoked and it was a sucker punch and it was done in a very horrific, inhumane way.
They're so emboldened. They're so passionate about this tiny little country in the Middle East, and they know nothing about it, probably can't point it out on a map. Welcome back to another episode of the Black and Jewish podcast. I am so excited for my guest today. I am with Dr. John Eaves, the founder and national director of Black and Jewish Leaders of Tomorrow. Dr. Eaves, thank you so much for being with me today.
Our pleasure, Ashira. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to the dialogue.
Me too. I have so many questions for you. But I first just want to start with your background, where
Yes.
you grew up, how you grew up, are both your parents Jewish, all of those things.
Well, I'm a proud third generation Black and Jewish American, but I give my wonderful designation credit to my grandfather, Cecil Eaves, who immigrated from Jamaica in 1913, well over 100 years ago. And he grew up in a Christian household, but he always knew that the seventh day of the week was not Sunday, but Saturday. And he felt that Shabbat was biblically sanctioned by God. And so when he moved to the United States, looking to be a doctor, met this beautiful woman in Jacksonville, Florida. They got married and they converted to Judaism. And so third generation grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, product of the public education system in Jacksonville, but went on to Morehouse College and got my bachelor's degree in mathematics. Then my master's degree from Yale University in religion. And I studied a lot about the Southern diaspora of Jews going south towards Africa. And I have a PhD in education. I teach at Spelman College, which is a Black college in Atlanta, Georgia, all-female school, has a strong history and a great background track record of producing dynamic Black women. And I teach in the political science department. And two more things. I'm a former politician. I served as the chairman of the county government, Fulton County, which is the largest county, the largest jurisdiction in Georgia, served for 11 years. And as you mentioned in your brief intro, I'm now the founder and national director of the Black and Jewish Leaders of Tomorrow. Very proud about that new organization that's been founded.
Wow, Dr. Eaves, you have so much range from mathematics to religion to
Yeah.
politics. You're like a mastermind. I'm like, wow, where do I start with this? Just take me a little bit back to, you said it was your grandfather, Cecil?
Cecil.
Cecil. That's so interesting about the Jamaican Jewish community. Do you know if he was descendant of the Jews that came from Spain and went down into Jamaica?
So we don't know exactly. However, you're right. First of all, Judaism is a lot more diverse than people give credit to. And
Absolutely.
not only is there an African presence of Jews, there's a Caribbean presence of Jews, especially in Jamaica. Even Rastafarians are sort of maybe distant folks who kind of equate to the lost tribes of Israel. So there's a sentiment in the Caribbean, especially in Jamaica, that Black folks are truly descendants of Israelites or Jews. But he, I think, was probably a little bit different in that he grew up in a strong Christian household, but he was a reader and a thinker, and everything didn't add up for him. And so he was introduced to Judaism in the United States. He became interested and he converted. And so also here in the United States, there's a Black Jewish community. Some of them go back to the early 1900s. And some of them call themselves Black Israelites, Hebrew Israelites. Others are more mainstream members of the Jewish community. Well, anyway, he was a part of one of those Israelite congregations, and that's how I was introduced. And now I'm part of the
Wow.
Temple in Atlanta, which is also known as the Hebrew Benevolent Congregation. which is the largest synagogue in the state of Georgia. So I'm very active in the Jewish community as well as the Black community in Atlanta.
Where in the 1900s, can you tell me where that Hebrew Israelite community started? Was it down in Florida or Alabama? Where was it? Or Georgia? Where was it? Was it in the South?
Yeah, so there were, again, going back to my master's degree study, graduate study, there were several groups that were formed in the early 1900s. A group led by what's called Prophet Cherry,
Hmm.
Prophet William S. Crowdy, Rabbi Matthew Wentworth. Those are three charismatic Black men who founded and established Israelite congregations in mostly the South and the Eastern seaboard of the United States. And many of them claimed that they were descendants of the lost tribes of Israel. And so, as you know, Black people in America during enslavement were um, mostly indoctrinated with Christianity. But in the early 1900s, there was a growing sentiment among people, Black people, that, hey, we're not necessarily Christian. We are actually authentically connected to the Israelites of the Bible. And you also may know about Marcus Garvey. Marcus
Yes.
Garvey was also Jamaican, and he was all about Black nationalism, the land, producing for yourselves. And he also echoed a similar sentiment that Black people were the descendants of the lost tribes of Israel.
I
So,
didn't know that Marcus Garvey echoed that sentiment.
oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah,
That's
definitely.
amazing. That's
Yeah, yeah,
amazing.
yeah. So there were these powerful, and there were powerful women too, but less known. But the men certainly established organizations, were leaders, and so that sentiment was very much present in the early 1900s in the United States.
Wow, very interesting. Take me back to how you grew up. What type of household did you grow up in? Was it religiously Jewish? Was it Christian? How did your parents raise you? And tell me just about like your identity. Anything that you struggle with being both Black and Jewish.
Absolutely. It was a Jewish household, maybe not as um, traditional as maybe some Ashkenazi Jews may have as a household, but we certainly we observed Shabbat, observed the high holidays. Within my tradition, didn't necessarily have to go to a bar mitzvah.
Okay.
Um, um, Plan to do that as an adult. However, all the holidays and all the observances we abided by. Even though the United States is in general sort of a Christian society, Easter, Christmas, those are pretty much foreign to me. I think people find it very odd for a Black man in the United States to say, I've never put up a Christmas tree, or I've never done this or never done that. It's completely foreign to me because I grew up in a Judaic household. But going back to your question about being Black and Jewish, it certainly has its positives, but it also has its challenges.
Mm.
Often as a child was asked, how can you be Black and Jewish, as if those two terms were antithetical or contradictory of each other. But always got that question as a child. However, I think that there's a growing number of Jews of color, as we refer to it in the United States. Brown and Black people who are Jews, you don't hear that as much as you used to hear it. But for me, I was very athletic growing up. I played football, I played soccer, I wrestled, played basketball. Unfortunately, a lot of those games in high school are on Friday night and Saturday. And even though I was a pretty good athlete, uh, I was not able to play on Shabbat, which was very painful for me as a Black man, young man, growing up in the South. However, when I went
Wow.
to
Did
Morehouse, my
your
father,
friends understand, or were they like, you're like the odd kid out? Like, what are you doing? Like, what does this even mean?
yeah, no, they was like, man, you're crazy. I mean, because I was good.
Yeah.
And I remember my senior year in high school, there were two games on Saturday night that I could play. And I actually played a 10-game season, but only played in two games.
Oh,
Those were a
wow.
Saturday night. And I would practice during the week. And then I would go to services, Shabbat services Friday night, which was, painful for me as a child, as a teenager. But I had to do it, and I respected my parents. And so that
Did
conviction,
your parents put you in public school or did they put
yep,
you
oh
like in
yes,
Hebrew day school? Public
now
school?
public
Okay.
school, yeah, public school. They were public school educators, opponents of public education.
Did you have other Jews around you? Did you guys have like communities where you could plug into your Jewish community who could, understand your identity and your practices and your traditions? And then you have your other Black community, or was it just largely you lived in a Black community that was largely Christian?
Black community that was largely Christian, and there were other Black people who were Jewish within that community, but we were relatively small. We
Okay.
found comfort and fellowship within our synagogue, but we did not really, our numbers were not large enough to sustain a school or an athletic league. We had to kind of integrate into the larger society. As Black people, that was relatively easy from a social perspective, but from a religious perspective, it was a challenge.
Have you been to Israel?
Yes, I have. I've been twice. I have family members who have lived in Israel. I have family members who've served in the Israeli military. I have family members who are joint or dual citizens. So I've been to Israel twice, and I hope to get there soon, within the next year or so.
God willing. Tell me about your relationship and connection to Israel. How did you feel when you went to Israel? What did you think and what did you see?
My experience is like almost any other Jew who comes home. It's my ancestral home, it's my spiritual home. And so it's very special to me. It was very fulfilling to go throughout Israel. I went to the north, near the Golan Heights, Sea of Galilee area, went south. Did not make it down to Eliad, that area, but I've been to the Dead Sea area, been to, of course, Jerusalem, Tel Aviv. So it was a very fulfilling experience. Because I'm a former politician, I got a chance to go to Israel both from a personal standpoint, but also from a political standpoint. And when I went as a political figure, I had a chance to meet some political figures. I met the mayor of Tel Aviv, and as well as with the Israeli government. And I also had a chance to go to the West Bank. I went to Ramallah.
Amazing. You went to
And,
Ramallah. I've been to Ramallah
uh,
as well.
yeah, I had a
So what
chance.
did you think while you were there on like the political trip? What do you think about, people accusing Israel of, being an apartheid state since you went to both, Israel and the West Bank and seeing Ramallah? What were your thoughts about Israel being an apartheid state?
Most Americans are clueless about the ins and outs of Israel. They don't know, they don't really understand how diverse the country is. It's a democratic state, it's an ally of the United States. There are many Israelis who want peace. There's a Palestinian presence in Israel. Um, I think the biggest thing that I saw from going to Ramallah and having some limited view of the West Bank was there really is a need, in my opinion, for a two-state solution. And so and I talk about that here in the United States. I strongly and staunchly believe that Israel has a right to exist, but also feel that from a long-term peace perspective, there needs to be a two-state solution.
Dr. Eaves, just to push back a little bit on the two-state solution idea, I'd love to hear your thoughts about what do you think will happen if the Palestinians do indeed create a state? We know in the past Israel has offered them, to have a state over 5 times, and they've rejected it. But do you think that if they were to create a state now, we would be letting them create a state just to build up a military to then attack us?
Yeah, I think that there needs to be some sort of guided, some sort of some degree of intervention that um, happens along the path of a two-state solution. I do believe that there's a possibility of some sort of UN involvement. I think that there's got to be some sort of way that um, Palestine becomes, perhaps democratic, and there is I won't say bifurcation because I don't want to sound too academic, but you got to figure out how can you eliminate the terrorist component that's there,
Right.
whether it's Hamas or Hezbollah, which I think is more prominent in the north. But how can you really, in the short term, ensure that that is not a threat? Um, I do think that there's some positive things that are happening in terms of Israeli relations with some of its neighbors, whether it's Egypt, Jordan, and we were very excited here in the United States about the agreement between Israel and Saudi Arabia. And I think that
Yes.
some of the other neighboring Arab countries see the value of a good relationship with Israel. It may be a little bit naive for Palestine to have that type of relationship initially, but hopefully that will be sort of a long-term goal. I
Yeah,
think many
I
people,
think it's just difficult to imagine because there's no good faith actor on their side. There's no one to actually negotiate with in terms of leadership. There's no one on their side that wants, you know, a Palestinian state and wants to live peacefully next to a Jewish state. And so I think that's why it's really difficult to even imagine a two-state solution, not because Israelis, well, now after October 7th, I think the sentiment is that Israelis don't want a two-state solution. It's not even something they can talk about right now. But when they were open to that, it was more like, well, like, who are we going to negotiate with? Because we have like Abbas, like, from the PLO and then Hamas. So they don't have this like Martin Luther King leader per se on their side.
they don't. I mean, the other piece that's related to the conversation is here in the U.S., we've seen some of the raw footage of the October 7th attack. I was in New York City last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, and there's something called the Nova exhibition.
Mm-hmm.
And prominent TV personality has this exhibit that's currently in New York, will be in Washington, D.C. And it was very horrific to see the inhumanity that was displayed during the attack. But I think, those of us who are in the United States, whether you're part of the Jewish community or not, on the one hand, we certainly do have our strong support for Israel, but from our standpoint, we just think, okay, in terms of a long-term solution, a road to potential peace, coexistence, there's got to be a two-state solution. And I think that's a growing sentiment here in the United States.
Yeah. Talk to me about campus protest. Being a educator, being a university professor yourself, what do you think about these protests?
So, sort of within the um, the fabric of the United States is the right to display civil disobedience within limits. And Americans protest about anything that they feel is morally wrong. I think that students do have a right to protest. Some faculty members have been a part of it, but it has morphed into more than just civil disobedience. In many cases, it's morphed into anti-Semitism. And it's been traumatic for Jewish students at many colleges and universities in the United States. And university administrators and the leadership has done an awful job of protecting Jewish students and done an awful job of sort of keeping the protests within areas that is not disruptive. It's
Why
been
do you
very
think that is? Why have administrators failed at protecting the Jewish students? What could they have done better from an administrative perspective for those of us who, don't work in education, don't have a background of the, processes and procedures and regulations that could have taken place to make sure that everyone on campus is safe and everyone does have their ability to show civil disobedience, like you said, but there's a limit, making sure that, students aren't hurt during protests.
Yeah, that's a straightforward and but good question. Most civil disobedience and protests that occur on college campuses, usually it's directed externally. So there's the enemy outside or the whatever outside that the students will be directing their anger. Let's even look at the Vietnam War, which 50, 60 years ago, it was directed towards American intervention in Vietnam. This time, you happen to have Jewish students who are within that community of the university. And many of the Jewish students all the Jewish students are supportive of Israel, even if there's some divided perspectives on how the government is handling the war. But all students are supportive of Israel. And many of the American students who are non-Jewish have a tendency to direct their anger towards the Jewish student. And much of that anger has gone over the line of anti-Semitism. And so because of this internal dynamic within the college community, directed within and towards its students, some administrations, some leaders have had difficulty managing that dynamic. And so when you try to protect if you perceived as being too pro-Israel, then you get a lot of pushback from those who are more pro-Palestinian. The other thing that's happening in the United States, there's some sort of orchestrated feeding of propaganda of the Palestinian cause that's being fed to students. I don't know what it is and how but it's being done through social media, and it's very one-sided. And so many American students have a tendency just to hear that one point of view and then automatically jump on that side.
Why do you think students are so passionate about this issue? I mean, we have videos of them not even knowing which river or which sea that, the Palestinians claim they want to, from the river to the sea. If you ask them which river or which sea, can you name the river? Can you name the sea? And they're like, and they're wearing the keffiyeh and they don't know what it means. And why do you think they feel so emboldened and so passionate about these terms and coming out for support for Palestinians?
Yeah, I mean, we've all
Can we pause just 1 second? I'm
Sure.
so sorry. This phone's going off. So sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, so when I edit, we'll pick up from right there. Okay. 1, 2, 3, and then you can go.
So college students are some of them are just one step removed from childhood. And college is sort of this developmental period where you become an adult. You learn to critically think. You learn to weigh the pros and cons. You learn to look at both sides. And sometimes in this whole continuum of development, they're not quite there. And so there's a tendency sometimes to jump on one side without critically looking at the other side. And so that's, for me as a professor, that's part of the problem. And the other part of the problem is most students are clueless about Israel. It's just clueless about it, just really clueless about it.
And that's why I'm so shocked, because they're so emboldened. They're so passionate about this tiny little country in the Middle East, and they know nothing about it, probably can't point it out on a map, but they are rioting and protesting as if they have family members and they have connection to Gaza and to Israel.
Well, the other thing too is it's interesting that Ashira, that you're, in Israel, and certainly there's a diverse, there's a lot of diversity in Israel.
Yes.
But in a strange way, some people view um, the war with racial lens, meaning they see what they perceive as a white nation beating up on a brown nation.
Right.
I can't fully explain that. That's the way it's perceived.
And Dr. Eaves,
It's
just to run it back to your time in Israel, what type of color of people did you see while you were
all
there?
types. People
Yes.
are just absolutely Again, I'm not sure if your audience is familiar with the term clueless, but um, they are they are unaware that there are um, Sephardic Jews. They're Jews from Ethiopia. I've heard stats that Israel is really a minority in terms of a brown presence. There's almost a minority majority country. I'm not sure if
Yeah, that's
that's
a fact. Yeah,
yeah.
it's a
And
majority
so
Sephardic country. Yes, most
yeah,
people are from North Africa or the Middle East.
most Americans would be shocked if they knew that.
Dr. Eaves,
And
what are the consequences to Americans, and not just in the case of Israel, but in the case of, the world, always taking the position and lens of the oppressor and the oppressed? What type of consequences does that have on our society, here and worldwide, that we continue to look at conflicts around the world in that lens?
it's an excellent question. It, that's an excellent question. I think that yeah, I mean, I think that at least for Americans, we root for the underdog. That's sort of within the psyche of our culture. We root
Right.
for the underdog. And we immediately sometimes assume that conflict is between the mighty versus the underdog.
Mm.
And we also assume that the mighty is often unjustified in asserting its power to address something. We just make those assumptions. And again, I'm going to go back to what I said about critical thinking. We don't sometimes look at both sides. We don't do a strong analysis. But I think you're right. There's sometimes we are on the wrong side because of our quick assumption that the underdog is the one who is being picked on, and don't necessarily understand and want to acknowledge that sometimes the underdog is the one that has instigated
Mm.
something. And I think that this is certainly the case. Um, you know, the October 7th attack was was unprovoked, and it was a sucker punch. It was a hit against the most vulnerable, innocent people within Israeli society, and it was done in a very horrific, inhumane way. And the response to it was understandable.
Speaking of the underdog, I often talk about on my own platforms about, the woke religion, in terms of American society, and how most Jews in America do fall on the left in terms of their politics, right? I don't know if I want to call them leftist because we know that's like extreme, to the left, liberal, but meaning they support a lot of social justice movements. For example, Black Lives Matter, and so a lot of them were very hurt that these same justice movements did not support them, during after the October 7th attacks. And so I talk a lot about how Jews here in America are another minority, but for some reason they're not allowed to be deemed as victims. Mainly, I think because as a Jewish people, we don't see ourselves as victims, but they're not allowed the same, what's the word I'm looking for? They're not allowed the same, sympathies as other minority groups, because they're deemed as, I guess, white in a way. So, in your opinion, why do you think that Jewish people in America, especially being a minority as well, especially having a Holocaust history, especially having, having a history of having to overcome being discriminated against, et cetera, et cetera. Hate crimes, we know in America, the two highest groups that hate crimes are against are Jews and Blacks. But for some reason, Jews are not given the same sympathies as other minority groups.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you said it well. It's a weird dichotomy. Meaning what's happening right now in terms of anti-Semitism, if that same type of vitriol were directed towards Black people, this country will be beside itself.
Right.
It just would be completely unacceptable for outward type racism to be directed towards Black students on a college campus. It would just be completely unacceptable. But at the same time, there is a degree of tolerance that's allowing anti-Semitism to happen. And I think that is a very somewhat complex issue, but I think that there is sort of this. I think that there's been a rude awakening. I think that anti-Semitism, when we think it has gone away, is just always just slightly underneath the surface. And I think what's been very problematical and disappointing for me as a Black person who's also Jewish is that too many Black people are becoming anti-Semitic.
Before we move to the Black and Jewish relations, because I really have a lot of questions for you on that, I just want to ask one more question in terms of universities, especially highlighting HBCUs. And because you are a professor at Spelman, what's happening on those campuses? We don't see those campuses in the news, so I don't know. Are they protesting? Are they pro-Palestine, pro-Israel? What are the sentiments of the students at Spelman or any other HBCUs that you know?
Yeah. So the reason why the sentiment is not as volatile as what you see at Columbia University or Harvard or Yale, Stanford, is because there's limited Jewish presence that's there. And so that's just straight, honest observation there. There's definitely a pro-Palestinian lean on Black college campuses. There's also a degree of tolerance just freely given to the Palestinian cause, even by the administration of the college community. And so I think the limited conflict that you would see on TV is only because of the limited nature of Jewish presence on these college campuses.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Talk to me about Black and Jewish relations in Atlanta. What are the relationships like? I know you sit on a number of boards for Jewish organizations and you sit on a number of boards, for Black causes. What are the relationships like between the two communities, if there's any at all, in terms of, I don't know how Atlanta is laid out and who lives where and what neighborhoods, but what's the interaction between Blacks and Jews in Atlanta?
The good news of all of this is the past has been pretty good.
Okay.
And pre-October 7th. So there's a great story, and I'm going to up my enthusiasm in this podcast interview. The great story is one of reciprocity, where Black people have benefited from Jews and Jews have benefited from Blacks. And what I mean by that is Jewish philanthropic support helped to found some of these Black colleges that I referenced earlier today. Jewish presence helped to establish the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP. But it's been reciprocal, where there are many stories of Jewish Holocaust survivors who fled Europe, who were scholars, who were accustomed to teaching in the academic community. When they left Europe to come to the United States, many of them could not teach at the white colleges here. But guess what? HBCUs, the Black colleges, received them, and they taught and had an impact, and they were integrated into the faculty as as legitimate and valued members of the faculty. That is a story of reciprocity that's not heard.
I'm glad you made
Dr.
that point because we
Yeah,
never hear stories of reciprocity.
yeah,
Oftentimes, when I'm pushing back on my Jewish brothers and sisters, saying, listen, when we're talking about breakdowns of relationships, we have to understand that there's always two people in a relationship and both contribute to the building up of it and the breaking down of it, you know? And so, from their perspective, they're always seeing, like, we supported the Black community and they never support us. And so, I'm glad that you told that story of reciprocity. And you're
absolutely.
in your opinion, why do you think, or if you think there is a breakdown between Black and Jewish communities? I'm kind of 50-50 on this idea with Black and Jewish relations. Like I want to build more unity in the communities, but I was just in Brooklyn and I was there for Shabbat and I'm going around Brooklyn and Crown Heights and I'm thinking, okay, every other house is a Black house or a Jewish house. Like you guys live on top of each other. And so I'm kind of confused of like how these two communities are not having, you know, unity or getting along because they live on top of each other. So I personally, I'm like, is this just something that we think in our heads? Is it really happening? Is it just something we see on social media? Because when I look at Brooklyn and I know the history of, you know, some of the Crown Heights riots and different things like that. But when I go there now, you know, I just see a bunch of, you know, Blacks and Jews in, you know, areas that are ghetto, areas that are not, and living next to each other from what I see peacefully.
I mean, that's a great observation. I mean, it's the way I see it also is it's almost like two people who are at a dance and they're sitting on the sidelines and they see this attractive person on the other side of the room and one person's just afraid to go to the other and say, do you want to dance? And and this sort of a simplified analogy, but I think I've found through my experiences that people are interested in coming together, but they don't know how to come together. And
Mm,
they really don't know how. And I think so. Let me just mention another point
okay.
that I think is important. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., this nationally renowned peace activist, world leader, great thinker, the head of the civil rights movement in the United States, he Ashira, he strategically extended an invitation for Jews, prominent Jews, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, also Rabbi Jacob Rothschild out of Atlanta, and others to be a part of the face of the civil rights movement.
Mm,
And he felt that diverse face, not just all Black, but diverse Catholics, Jews, Protestants, Black and white, etc., was more effective in terms of getting the establishment to see the wrongs that will be done by the United States government in terms of laws. So he was very strategic. And so I think now we have to be strategic on both sides.
mm,
Jews need allies. I think if anything that has been very apparent post October 7th is Jews are out here by ourselves, fending for ourselves, but we need allies. We can't do it all by ourselves.
yep.
We need allies. And to me, the easiest allies to get are Black Americans, or people who are part of Black and brown communities around the world, especially Black Americans,
Yep.
because Black Americans, even from a religious standpoint, in terms of what's called African American spirituals, the songs that were sung in terms of deliverance, Go Down Moses,
Let my
um,
people go.
Let My People Go, some of the names of churches, the AME Zion Church, Zion, Hebrew name, Zion, is because Black folks, from a religious standpoint, gained strength of and relevance of the plight of the Israelites in Egypt. And so I think within the psyche of Black people, they understand historically. And so I think Black folks in America can be allies, but there's got to be some sort of way of extending an olive branch to ask for the help.
What do you think that olive branch is? Also, given that most celebrities, not just Black ones, but most of Hollywood has come out and, like, we see, they're posting all eyes on Rafa. No one posted all eyes on, Kibbutz Be'eri or all eyes on Near Oz, nothing like this, but all eyes on Rafa. And the Hollywood community is heavily supporting Gaza and Black celebrity. And so, how do you think that the Jewish people can extend that olive branch to the layman who's influenced by the culture of Hollywood?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, I mentioned earlier the Nova exhibition, which shows the horrific attacks October the 7th. There were some prominent Black media people in New York. And so I think some of it is just giving them the opportunity to see the horrific nature of the attack. So I think that there's got to be more intentionality to show what has happened to Israel.
Mm.
It's easy to see. Of course, we saw the footage a few days after October the 7th. But once the bombing and once the Israeli military started, its offense into Gaza, that's all we basically see now. And so it's 95% of the footage. So I
Do
think
you
that
think
there's
that
got to be.
Israel should release the 47-minute video that Hamas recorded? I seen it, and I know they were only showing it to certain groups and certain media groups. And my sentiment has been, you need to release all the footage. And the Israeli government sentiment is that they won't because it's out of respect for families, etc. But in terms of PR, I agree with you. We're seeing children in Gaza, being killed. We're seeing families being destroyed. We're seeing bombing. We're seeing all of these things, but we're not showing what's happening to the Israelis.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the PR, this is all about PR and the optics and um, whoever on the Ghazian side is winning the public, the court of public opinion
Mm,
because of what's being seen on television. And I saw the 47. I've seen two different footages. I saw the exhibit in New York, and I saw the 47 minute footage with the person being beheaded. I mean, it was
yeah,
awful.
it was
And so,
awful.
uh, but even I was part of a select group invited to see it, and it's very secretive. And so,
Exactly. Me
I
as
don't think
well.
people. I don't think people. Most Americans have seen the brutality. Yeah, you hear the word brutality, but haven't seen it. And so, I think the PR, the public relations war, which is part of it, was being lost because of a reluctance to release the horrific nature of the October 7th attack. So most Americans, they hear Jews talk about how awful it was, but they don't necessarily see the footage that backs up the emotional feeling that Jews have about what happened. And so I think we gotta let people know.
What do you think the Jewish people could gain from Black America? Like, what type of contribution do you think Black American can give to the Jewish people? And also, in the reverse, what type of contribution and positivity could the Jewish people give to Black Americans?
You're a great interviewer. That's another great question.
Thank you.
I think Black America understands the need of coalition building,
Mm,
and I think even though there's so many systemic challenges that still exist for Black Americans, the the overcoming of those systemic issues and institutional issues, they are helped, they're assisted through support of others.
mm.
So I think allyship is incredibly important going forward for Jews to understand allies. Okay.
And how to
All right.
gain
So
them. Black
how to
Americans can
gain,
teach them how to gain allies and
how,
form
how,
coalitions. That's
how to
great.
gain.
That's such a great
Let
answer.
let me give you the corollary to that.
Okay.
Black Americans can learn from the inward strength and the inward connectedness of the Jewish community. So I'm trying to draw a little fine line of a distinction. The Jewish community is so inwardly supportive of ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
which is great, but there's a limit to what you can do without this assistance of others. The Black community is so good about coalition building and getting the support of others, sometimes at the expense of understanding its own inner strength. And
Mm.
so there's something that Jews can learn from Blacks and Blacks can learn from Jews. Blacks can benefit from understanding the inner strength, the inner workings, the interconnectedness of the Jewish community, how the Jewish community, when the stakes go down, Jews are there to support each other. Um, the Black community has had a checkered history in terms of when everything goes down. Is everybody su- supportive of us? There's always this Uncle Tom dynamic, the sellouts, who really aren't there. And so I think Blacks can learn from Jews and Jews can learn from Blacks.
I love that answer. Before I let you go, I want you to tell everyone about your new organization, the mission and the purpose behind it.
I'm very proud of this organization. It is a product of who I am. It's part of the intersectionality that you asked questions about early in the interview. It's about this incredible world that I live in, this incredible space that I am, the Blackness and the Jewishness and the intersectionality of it. I think I can draw on the strengths of both cultures and perspectives. And unfortunately, the plight of Jews and the plight of uh, Blacks in America is very similar in terms of the isms, the hate that we each encounter. Unfortunately, we sort of address these issues in separate parallel tracks and not points of intersection between the two groups. And so I came up with the idea of bringing Black and Jewish college students together to rekindle some of the historical alliances that Blacks and Jews have had in the past, to remind them of what our past has taught us in terms of our collaboration, and to give Black and Jewish students of today, Black and Jewish college students of today, sort of a roadmap or an idea of what the possibilities are in terms of collaboration, dealing with issues of anti-Semitism and racism on college campuses and in their communities today. I tell you, it's a modest effort. Maybe about 100 students so far have been involved in this effort. We're going to grow it to thousands, but so far so good. It's been excellent in terms of this aha moment. The aha moment is, wow. Black students say, wow, you are just as we are more alike than different. And Jewish students say, we are more alike than different. And
Yes.
it's incredible. You got to bring them together and let them talk, and let them share, and let them sometimes cry and get angry and be upset and talk about what life is, the challenges. And then when they hear all of that, it's like, wow, we have a very similar plight and challenge. Let's work together. So that's what my organization is all about.
I love that, Dr. Eaves. B'chatzlacha, as we say in Hebrew, that may you have much success as you build unity between these two communities that we both care about, that we're both a part of. And I love hearing stories like this because that's what we want to do here with the Black and Jewish podcast as well, is just unify these two communities and show how we are more alike than we are different. With
Exactly.
that being said, thank you so much for coming on the
My
Black and
pleasure.
Jewish podcast. It's been such a delight, and I look forward to doing more work with you in the future.
Of course, this has been great. Keep doing your thing as well. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone who watched and listened. And please go follow Dr. John Eaves. Like, comment, and subscribe down below. Until next time, I'll see you next week.